And we're in.
Awesome.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, Julia. Hey, Federica.
Hi.
So nice to have you here today. So we are recording this episode is going to be regarding the topic we're going to debate today is regarding food wasting, which is a really important topic for us in general. I would say for humanity, and it's something that actually I feel is really poorly debated right now in the public arena, and it should be debated more. And it is important both because it has a huge social impact, but also has an impact on climate change. And so here at the Monday's Evening Pub, this kind of improvised translation of this podcast, we have the pleasure and the honor to have Matt here with us, Matt Homewood, who's an activist and he's been fighting a lot on the topic of food waste. He's got a fantastic website and an Instagram page when he speaks and publish all the news about his initiatives. Matt, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for taking part to this episode.
Well, Julia, Federica, thank you so much for inviting me to come speak on here. And it's been a real pleasure, actually, to see how over the months public interest in food waste has seriously grown. And as we'll talk about, no wonder, because it really is at the heart of many of our social and environmental problems we face today as a global society.
Before we jump into the questions, I have to introduce Federica, not because she's a guest. She's actually she's actually one of the hosts of this episode, but it's the first time that people are going to see her live. So Federica is a member, is a great member, new acquisition of our team. She mostly writes for our website, but she's helping me organize some lives, and actually she's been the point of contact for Matt. So for everyone who's following this live today, please welcome Federica Testa. She's a great asset for our team. So with that said,
thank you.
Pleasure. With that said, let's dive in and let's jump into the topic. So first of all, I mean, let's start from the basic, I would say, from the basics. How do we define food waste? What it is exactly? Because I don't think people are overly familiar with the concept, actually. So if you would like to give us a general introduction, Matt, it would be great.
Well, it's a great place to start. And I think actually the definition of food waste is actually where all our problems begin. I probably got it. Many people probably disagree with what I define as food waste. But anyway, food waste basically is actually split up into food loss and food waste across the entire global supply chain. And essentially, it's food that ought to have been fed to people, but for many different reasons, it's ending up wasted. And there are different destinations for that waste too. So it is a complex problem, and we have made it probably more complex than it needs to be. But one thing I'd really like to do right at the beginning is to split consumer food waste and the rest of the supply chain's food waste, because the rest of the supply chain is often, private sector companies, working, living in this global system. But then consumers, where there is a huge amount of food waste, that is people throwing their money out the window. And so the motive behind the food loss, food waste at the start and middle of the food supply chain is very different to the consumer, where unfortunately human stupidity, we're literally just throwing our money out the window because food has become less appreciated in today's society. So basically, that's a broad description of food waste.
So, I mean, go, Federica. Go for it.
Thank you very much for this first introduction. Just to maybe also for our public to understand better, when we talk about the value chain, how we differentiate between food loss and food waste. Because from my understanding, they both can happen in the same part of the value chain, but then they're defined differently. Is that correct? Or?
Well, so from what I can understand, basically the United Nations and an organization in Britain called WRAP, I always kind of forget what they stand for, but Waste and Resources Action Program, I think. They have got together and worked on this for the past kind of 16, 17 years, and they have done some progress. But they have defined the issue as this. Food loss is basically from the farm all the way up to the retailer but excluding the retailer, so the supermarket. Then food waste is the retailer, canteens, restaurants, and then all we consumers. And to make things even more complex, at the United Nations level, food loss is focused on by the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome. Food waste is dealt with the United Nations Environment Programme in Nairobi, Kenya. So why we have split this issue like that, to me, is beyond me. And so take one example. When a farmer wastes, X thousands kilos of potatoes because the supermarket has told him or her, excuse me, by the way, potatoes, they have to be between 3.5 centimeters and 7 centimeters. Anything below or above, we don't want. So the farmer's left with all this crop that he's suddenly stuck with because, it's nature. But it's not the farmer's decision that all this food is suddenly wasted. It's supermarket and their management and corporate policies that are kind of driving part of that food loss. So it is complex. And of course, I suppose from the institution point of view, they might say, well, the farmer can give that food to livestock, or they can turn it into biogas. They've got other options to not waste the energy. But the thing is, a lot of those destinations only capture a small percentage of the total resources that has gone in to grow the food in the first place. Livestock, only gains about 10% of the energy as we go up. So it's getting a little complex already, but just to give you an idea that the way we define it is problematic.
I think what you said is very interesting, because this is something for example, I wasn't aware of. This decision of base what that the company makes, they base what they actually want from the retailer on the size or the weight of this kind of stuff. I would say, what is exactly, as far as you're aware, the main question that was running through my mind now is, what is exactly the reason why that happens? Why companies do they have this particular strict policy regarding these particular specifics, and why that is widely accepted, in your opinion, or whether there is a policy regarding that is specific? I don't know. I'm very ignorant on the subject. So
it's a fascinating topic. For anyone who really wants to go seriously deep into the topic, I recommend a book by a man called Tristram Stewart, and it is called Waste. And it's about a 300-page book, and it's fascinating. And okay, so why do corporations set the cosmetic standards? Well, they argue that it's we, the consumers, who only buy, beautiful fruit and vegetables. But really, who knows? Because supermarkets have such power. Basically, it's an oligopoly system. It's not a monopoly, but it's an oligopoly, as in there's very few actors that dominate the entire market. So in the UK, you've got 5 or 6 companies. In Denmark, 4 or 5. So any supermarkets have a huge power in the Western world. Most of us go to a supermarket to consume all our food. So they kind of set what is available at market. And it'll be very hard to discover whether it's actually we consumers or the supermarkets. But this is the system we're stuck with today. So we really have to find solutions to it. And what's interesting is that supermarkets often blame it actually on the EU, saying, actually, it's the public... it's the EU from Brussels that have set all these legislation demands. But actually, public officials in Brussels actually say, yes, we have set those, but it turns out supermarkets are even more strict. So in the end, it is the supermarkets that, through their power, cause a lot of mayhem for farmers, basically.
Yeah, that's a super interesting topic. Actually, also, I wasn't fully aware of what was the role played by supermarket in the food waste. But you also claim that it's majority of the food waste. It's the responsibility lies on the supermarkets more than consumers or policymakers. Why do you think Why do you think it's that? So what is the interest of supermarkets of providing these policies and not changing changing them?
Yeah, so I focus mostly in Denmark because it's a complex world, and I do believe in legislation. So I really focus on the data in Denmark, and consumers as a whole in this country consume the most, waste the most food. It's 37% of the entire nation's food waste, but there are 5.8 million citizens in this country. There are only 2,700 supermarkets. And can you guess how much food waste is generated by supermarkets? It's 23%. But you got 2,800, 5.8 million. So when we talk about per actor and per citizen, so per actor, per citizen, per supermarket, a Danish consumer wastes 45 kilograms of food per year. A Danish supermarket wastes 59,000 kilos per year. And that's just in store. We don't even talk about what's wasted at the manufacturer level, or as we've alluded to previously, at the farm. Because the other angle that's problematic is that farmers have very few customers to sell their bumper crops. Supermarkets are kind of the only customer. So you try convince a farmer to speak out about this issue. They won't do it because it could go out of business overnight. So in a way, the farmer food loss or food waste is the big black hole in this. No one really knows how much is going to waste because it's expensive to carry out these studies and generate the data. But anyway, so we're coming back to Denmark. That's why I focus on the supermarket, because already on a per actor basis, we've got a 1,300 time difference between per citizen and per supermarket. So when we dig into the maths, already you can see that just saying, citizens waste the most, it doesn't hold when we look at the real data. And as we've said, consumers are throwing out their money out the window. When supermarkets, my big role is actually dumpster diving, because when I go around the back and I find 180 bags of coffee that have not been discounted in a really small supermarket in Copenhagen, this to me is an economic sham, basically, because what's happening is that supermarkets are using the best before date or the use by date as an excuse to then throw this surplus food. But really, if public policymakers wanted to solve this issue and put a price on the kilo of food waste that it deserves, when we know of the social and environmental issues that it causes, supermarkets wouldn't continue with this lack of discounting. So for example, say per ton of food waste, at the moment there's about 80 euros of 80 euros fee by the state. But if you bump that up to say 8,000 euros, suddenly for supermarkets are really in trouble, and they will very much become more efficient, and they will discount hard and in good time in relation to that legal date, which will mean that all consumers in this country will have access to better offers on food that should be eaten, not funding the local incinerator for energy.
It's interesting, Matt. What I found fascinating about this is that you're talking about Denmark, that in the popular culture is actually one of the countries that is more aware of pretty much all economic or ecological problems. And I suspect it's the same. I mean, it should be the same for food waste. According to your words, it kind of isn't. And I was wondering, this is exactly what I wanted to ask you. You focus your attention on Denmark, but do you think that there is discrepancy across the world regarding food waste? Whether there are some geographical locations that are more responsible for food waste than Denmark, or they are actually better dealing with this problem than Denmark? Because I'm aware that you traveled a lot. Did you? You went to US, you went to East Asia, and you're British you're born in Britain, so you're a very international figure. This is what I mean. So I was wondering whether you have a feeling of what's going on outside Denmark, and whether this is a global problem, how bad it is globally.
So yeah, one of the key aspects of my work, An Urban Harvester, which is the anonymous page I set up 2.5 years ago, which after a year, because of social media algorithms, I had to no longer become anonymous. is to focus on the work I do, but actually connect via the dumpster diving hashtag to other dumpster divers all across the Western world who have access to social media, because they do the work I do. So in Italy, I'm connected with a couple of people. In France, which has some of the tightest legislation on this planet with commercial food waste, there are dumpster divers who show shocking amounts. The UK, there are no dumpster divers because everything's locked. In the USA, there's a lot. So my point is that I really try and create a global consciousness around this Western epidemic, because it's part of the supermarket supply chain system. Where are we dealing better with food waste? Well, one country which has really gone from throwing all its food into landfill to actually at least making compost is the country of South Korea. I don't know exactly the specifics because, again, as I said, I don't focus so much on on consumer food waste, and I'm less interested in composting. I'm interested in more selling the food. But I do know that they've managed to make massive gains, going from, I think, 80% of food waste ending up in landfills and generating methane, which, as we know, is a bad greenhouse gas, to something like only 2 or 3% ending up in landfill today, because of a progressive policy where you pay per kilo of food waste you generate, and there were massive fines for putting it in the landfill. So that has created more recycling via composting, and I suppose because you place value on food once again, people actually eat the food. But yeah, you mentioned traveling. I think that the problem is in the West, we have become massively urbanized in a very short space of time. Like, for today, in the last couple of days, I've had a post on Instagram go completely viral. By far the most, 20,000 likes already in 3 days, whereas my normal post gets 200 likes, unfortunately. And it's about Oatly. And it's about, because Oatly, the massive milk company is suing a small UK farmer because the name is too similar and the packaging. And I'm not really interested in the case per se, but it's more the fact that we have lost a deep connection to food by becoming so urban and not having many links to farms or farmers. And you can see that people expect that they can eat beef 7 times a week, for example. And that, if you look from an ecological or farmer's perspective, is insanity. So I think that's one of the key problems. We have lost that connection. And as a consequence, our food system has become what it is today. And we have no respect for food, hence why we kind of accept between 33 and 50% of all food produced on this planet goes to waste. I mean, for example, in Denmark, why are we flying by airplane blueberries in the middle of January? That is a consumer problem. That is consumers buying just food that's completely off season. So it's many layers to it. And that's why I try and also tell the story of some of my harvest to A, show the insanity, and B, trying to get people to think about their consumption. But yeah, every country will have its own pattern. And I'm sure in Italy, if you went from Milano or you went to, the countryside of Sicily, the respect for food and its associated food waste would be hugely different. I remember being on holiday in Sicily with my parents, and we were walking around some markets in one of the towns, and you could see all the liver and kidney and brains of these livestock. To me, that was amazing. Until the age of 25, I'd never seen offal, never mind in the public arena. And that's because clearly in Sicily, there's still a strong food culture where people see livers. Oh, I could make a tasty meal from that. Whereas in UK, you feed it to the dogs or something. So again, it's understanding food. And so it's kind of a bit of a joke that this post on Oatly has gone so viral, because it's the fetishization of these goods, when actually we should be thinking, okay, oats, this is a fantastic crop. We can make ABC, not some Swedish idiotic brand,
Yeah, that's really that brings a lot of thoughts that we also need to think for example, the role that culture plays in the food waste. But you also mentioned your social media and your Instagram profile. And what is fascinating is, for example, seeing how many boxes of food of any type you dive or dumpster dive. So maybe as an clarification, can you please just tell something more about what is your role as dumpster diving, or what do you do as an urban harvester? Because I'm pretty sure that I'm personally not completely familiar with what is your job, basically.
Yeah, so the world of dumpster diving. So how I got into the world of dumpster diving is basically when I went to the USA 4 summers ago. I cycled from New York City to the West Coast, San Francisco, with 30 other people. And it was a trip organized by an environmentalist in America called Rob Greenfield, who's become a good friend. And he and his girlfriend had already cycled across America, but this time they wanted to bring other people in. So they just put it out on social media, and 30 of us turned up in New York City in May 2017 to cycle across America. And it was a trip about sustainability and you know, for me personally, learning about this country. Trump had just come into office, for example. So there's many things. And anyway, we roll out of New York City and get into New Jersey. And I was a student, so I was pretty poor. So I said to Rob, what are the chances of dumpster diving? How easy is it? And he said, he thought I was joking because, of course, he'd done it so much. And so we went around the back of a pharmacy, because pharmacies in the USA sell food for some reason. And we climb in, and, we've got 20, 30 kilos of almonds. We've got orange juice that are coming up from Florida. So much food. And so then I was like, wow, okay, he was not joking. And then basically from New Jersey all the way to San Francisco, apart from a couple of areas right in the middle where there are very few people living, we are living off supermarket food waste. Or, go around the back of a donut shop and you got, a ton of donuts, literally at the end of the day. So that's when I really realized, wow, the food waste situation is completely insane. And then also by cycling across a country over 3 months, you really get the appreciation of how an entire continent's land is used. So in the USA, you've got GMO soybeans, GMO corn, most of which are feeding cars or cows. Then you've got all the cows down south. So you really understand how this nation's land's being pillaged, basically, with very little wildlife left. So then when I came to Denmark, I finished my master's, which is about climate change. And I wrote a thesis called Transitioning the Food System for the Anthropocene, basically talking about diversity. Part one was basically understanding how the global industrial food system has come to be since basically World War II, critiquing that from the environmental and social perspective. And then number two, because I'm a positive person, I don't want to, just talk about negative things. Number two was about identifying alternatives, like the organic agricultural movement, or something called agroecology, which is basically growing food mimicking natural systems. So diversity over space and time, resilience for the farmer, because you never know when a pest or bad weather event's going to come. So just intelligence, basically. And number three was identifying the barriers, essentially financial capitalism, where people just want more and more profit every single quarter that goes round. And then I was like, okay, that was deep. But I was like, okay, we got this food waste problem that we've identified, that third and a half. How can I get people to care more about this? Because if we can solve this, we can really reduce the pressure on our global biosphere. So then that's why I kind of came back onto social media after boycotting it. And then I started an urban harvest. And so literally, instead of going into the supermarkets I used to shop, now I go round the back by bicycle, because in Denmark, they're freely accessible and it's legal, unlike a lot of countries. And for the entire year of 2019, and now I do it here and there, I would go by bicycle every single day and bring back what I could find. And I'd just bring back a fraction. It's the tip of the iceberg because there was so much. And so I would bring back especially meat, because Denmark is the pork capital of the world. We've got 18 times more pigs per capita here than the USA, for example. So every single day, there's so much pork going in the bins. So I bring back the pork and tell the story of how, we're growing soybeans in Brazil, shipping it across the planet, feeding it, pretty inhumanely to these pigs in West Denmark, and then bringing it to the supermarket and then converting it into energy for our Copenhagen sustainable flat. So again, telling that story of the complexity and the insanity of the system. And so I take a lot of time to take the photography to show that this food's perfect. It's not, a few rotten apples or a few lemons that have gone missing. This is millions of kilos of food every single year. And, that's their data, the supermarkets. How much can we actually trust them even? Because clearly across all their stores across the nation over time, they can profit. They make a loss on every single item, of course, but because of the scale that they sell, it's fine. And the issue is that small businesses that perhaps don't waste, they cannot compete against these companies on price. So it's unfair. And that's why I try and level up the system a little bit to make sure that we can all make a living from, growing and selling food, not just a few giants.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. I also remain quite shocked of how accessible is or how different the system works in Denmark compared to Italy. I'm currently living and working in Copenhagen, and you can find a lot of recycling centers, and I was quite shocked to see how many stuff, any type of thing is thrown out on a regular basis, and is just left in this small house in the middle of the street, and then taken to a bigger recycling center. But it was quite shocking for me coming from Italy, that has a completely different system.
Are you talking about kind of when consumers might put down their bed or some shelf?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they just leave it in the middle of the street, and I don't think that I've ever seen that before. So for me, it was quite strange. But I can imagine that there are a lot of people that just take it home if they want to, because it's completely accessible. But I can imagine that is the same also for food waste in supermarkets.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a funny point that you raise, actually, because Denmark is quite unique in that. And to be fair, the state has done some progressive things where there are these byrum, as they call them, like trading places where you can bring down some of your large items that you no longer want. And to be fair, I can't believe the amount of stuff people throw away here, but I'm sure it's like many other nations. But of course, Scandinavia is richer than most. And but the sad angle of that story is the amount of great resources I see there. And the large garbage, the storskal, as they call it, all that, believe it or not, is going to be wasted. Burnt for energy, which is sad when you see all that perfect wood and things. But yeah, I suppose the sheer quantity of it, what else do? You can't recycle it. Wages are high here. So it's a complex problem again.
On those lines, I came across something very interesting in the UK. You're probably already familiar with. We mentioned this in our Instagram stories today. Sorry, this question was not on our set list, but I was wondering whether it's something you might be interested in. So in the UK, I'm asking you because my wife is using one of these apps. So there's some small startups or companies that they started this initiative that is called the food rescuing. So what happens is that it's mostly, this is my understanding because I haven't used it as yet. My wife has used it on a couple of occasions and they're very good. So what happens is that companies such as Deliveroo, Uber Eats, blah, 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 and so all the little restaurants that are all on these delivery companies, at the end of the day, they know that they have a certain amount of food that they're going to waste and throw away because of market. So what happens is that they put that amount of food in these specific apps. There's a different apps completely for food rescuing, and you can buy them on a reduced price online essentially and collect them on the point of collection. So my wife on a couple of occasions bought a lot of bread, for example, that was going to be wasted completely. A very good quality bread, actually. I'm not talking about bad restaurants or lower quality enterprises. I'm talking about serious stuff. Is this something that is happening in Denmark, for example? Is it something that you came across at all? Because it's starting in the UK, it's something that is not very well known, but I was thinking that it might have a big potential to reduce, at least to help reducing the amount of food wasting. So I wanted to ask your opinion on that. Which
app was your wife using, by the way, just out of interest? Because there's more.
I actually can't remember the name. If we go along with the conversation, I can text her. I can ask her via WhatsApp. But it's just.
let's talk about mobile apps, because people are fascinated by this. And actually, you know, being in Denmark, it's only right that we raise the company that is Too Good To Go, because Too Good To Go is probably the most famous in the world at the moment. And it was set up by 5 Danish men in the year 2015-16. And the idea was literally that. They walked past the sushi place. No, they were sitting in a sushi place and they saw all the sushi there, but because Danish people love sushi buffets. You don't go to a buffet if you're keen about food waste, by the way, because that is definitely not the way to go. But anyway, so they were sitting there, they're like, oh my God, what's going to happen to all this food? And the young waitress was saying, yeah, it's all going to be thrown out. What do you think? And so then these guys in time kind of came up with the app you just described. And there are many others now. In France, you got one called Phoenix.
Karma. She just texted back literally now. Karma.
Karma's an app in Sweden. Olio is another app that's a UK app. And so basically they're all quite different from one another. And I would say that Karma and Olio are more progressive because they itemize the surplus food. So Karma, for example, from what I can understand, I don't use these apps myself, but I've studied them. Karma, you can say, okay, you've got an extra, chicken curry, I'll come and buy that for X price. The issue with Too Good To Go, and I will focus on that because they've literally got more than 30 million users, so people are very interested by it. And every time I post or speak in public, I get questions about this. So I think it's relevant. The issue of Too Good To Go is that from a supermarket model perspective, they go into partnership, and of course for the supermarket it looks good because they're solving their food waste. But if you look at the data, it's not quite the truth. So for example, Netto, one of the biggest companies here with the largest market share in Denmark, big announcement covered all across the media this time last year. You look at the data, the CEO himself in the article says, by the way, we're only doing 4.5 bags per day per store. No idea why they picked 4.5, but they did. So if you go around the back, the dumpsters are still full. And it's because of economics. Basically, by the time Too Good To Go have charged their discount of about 70%, 67%, and their commission, because of course they have to make money, the supermarket that is the bully of the global food system faces a 77% discount, and they don't like being bullied. So they place the cap, they're solving food waste, and everyone's happy. But turns out consumers are still being frauded. A few are getting good deals, but the masses are not. So supermarkets, that's the problem. The angle of restaurants, the problem with Too Good To Go is that if you go on an app right now and you go for your local bakeries or restaurants, you can already pre-order your food waste bag 24 hours in advance. To me, that's problematic. And it basically locks in the systemic issue that is overproduction. And what's worse is that you get new eco customers in, so it seems good for the businesses because they get new footfall, and you can market now your surplus. But the thing is, when you go to Pizza Express, for example, or any pizza restaurant, I was chatting to someone in private about this issue that works for one of these food waste apps, and he was telling me, from his experience in the food industry, this is how it works. A pizza product, all the at cost price, the wheat, the tomato paste, the vegetables on top, maybe the poor quality ham, all that costs 35 pence or 35 cents of euros. When we buy it, costs £7. So even when it's discounted, they can make still a profit on every single pizza because of the economics. 35 pence to £7, it's a 2,000-fold difference. So it doesn't solve food waste. That's the problem. And it's fine. Basically, it's an e-commerce platform is what it's become. Too Good To Go anyway. Karma and Phoenix, I don't know the model well enough, so I can't tell you the data if they're really cutting food waste. But Too Good To Go, I've studied because it's the most popular, and I see many, many problems.
Yeah, so I think that again, living here, I see that this is a super big thing, but they're also expanding in other countries. But going back to the problem of supermarkets, what do you think that could be a potential solution to this problem, or what could really be a game changer for reducing the amount of food waste at the supermarket level?
Okay, well, the supermarket level, I think food waste tax could have, I really believe the food waste tax could work, because so the food app cycle we know doesn't work. The other angle that's interesting that most countries pursue, including my own in the UK, or where I grew up, and the USA, of course, because there are so many poor people, is the charity model. So, you feed the poor on food surplus, which sounds good, but turns out the data shows that you don't solve food waste, and you especially, more importantly, don't solve poverty, which is a massive economic issue that needs dealing with policy. But in Denmark, WeFood, which is a social supermarket that's quite famous, and the food bank system, which has been here for over 15 years, together with all the free labor, the extensive financial resources, the media coverage, they only cover 1% of supermarket food waste. So again, basically, to be harsh, a complete waste of time. So I see it, food waste tax is the systemic solution for all supermarkets, because it's not one company, they're all doing it. And so then all consumers in this country can get access to those better deals, because this country isn't vegan. So all those pork products really should be sold had the price been right. But again, I'm positive and I try and find solutions. So I dig deep. So for example, now, personally, I bought a mill. So I no longer buy flour from a supermarket. I buy grain straight from a farmer or miller, and then I mill or flake my grain when I need to use it to make bread or pancakes or wherever that might be. And, we all eat carbohydrates about, 40-50% of our diet. So if people change the way they consumed and ate wheat products, of course, in Italy, that's so well liked too, that could have a massive impact on farmers' income and also our health by going back to our traditional roots with sourdough, for example. Fruit and vegetable, well, we live in the digital era now, luckily. And so there are more and more companies popping up that will deliver food straight from farms to consumers based on seasonality. It will never go back to a completely local food system, because it just won't happen. But certainly we could become more regional, like in Europe. You've got the berries growing up north, for example, then you could have your citrus and tomatoes growing down south in Italy. So you could have an exchange based on trade, and trade makes great sense, but it has to be used with intelligence. So that's fruit and vegetables. Meat, again, you could go to your local farmers, because there are still local farms. So in North Italy, you could eat prosciutto, or however you say it. There, meat, you could still have more of a local-based culture where, meat should be a reward or a treat. It shouldn't be, me eating meat 3 times a day. That definitely cannot take place with, 7, 8, 9, 10 billion people. Even fish, now there's apps that connect you with local fishermen. So there are ways to get away from the bigger companies that operate in the supermarket supply chain. Olive oil I buy straight from farmers from Spain. So that's what I try and do. I kind of call it anywhere but the supermarket, and I get better quality products. I learn more about the food, and my health has never been better, touch wood. So I try and communicate those solutions for people in Denmark, because of course there's no one size fits all solution. No matter where you live in the world, some crops and food cultures will make more sense. If you live in Malaysia, don't go buy Danish bread. That makes no sense. So everything has to be with where you are located on this planet.
Okay, this is a really good point. My next question regards a couple of things, actually. So a couple of friends and a couple of followers sent us some questions, and I think the first one I'm gonna ask is kind of related to the question that I asked. So I'm gonna kind of play devil's advocate here, in a sense that I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm a big fan of in Italy we call it like the 0 kilometer kind of economy, where you actually buy food from your local producer, and I think I try to do the same as many times as I can. Absolutely. But that said, first of all, it's quite difficult sometimes to actually find the local producer. That's the main thing. Although I agree with you, it's actually becoming a thing in the UK as well. There are tons of small companies starting to do that. Second, again, I don't want to defend the big companies, but the problem that I see there is that they do have a model of business that needs to be sustained at the moment. And there are workers working in these big companies too. And again, I'm not going to take a position of any sort here. I'm just wondering, and that's why I would like to gather your opinion about. One of the problems that I see with a tax, for example, is the fact that that could impact on consumers themselves. And that is not actually going to make this company more virtuous. It's just going to impact on the consumers, and they're just going to raise the price. Again, playing devil's advocate here, I'm not saying this for sure what's going to happen. I'm wondering that could be a side effect that they could have. And the second question I have is that, given the fact that part of the problem is the regulation on food established at a higher level, why some of these companies, because I mean, at the end of the day, even big corporations, they like to please consumers because they do. And there is a growing sensitivity about these problems. So the question is why they don't actually take initiative themselves to at least partially get rid of this regulation that has nothing to do with quality. It's just how the product appears and how the product appears to the consumer. Like, this is what I wanted to ask you in summary. I'm not sure if it's clear, but I hope it is.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take question number one, the whole local food culture. Yeah. It's a hard one. I think, Corona has made us realize that, living on a global economic system, especially a local food system, can cause massive issues, especially when we see Brexit also coming into force. So it is complicated, and I'm not entirely sure what the future holds, but certainly there are many different movements within the sustainable food movement. It's not one big mass. There are very many different opinions within that. And I just think that, we in Europe, it's a big continent, it's diverse, full of different habitats and climates. We don't need to be importing Uruguayan beef, for example, which is what I see sometimes in the dumpsters. So, and I know it's part of the World Trade Organization trade rules, and but yeah, I just don't think it's necessary. So that's one thing. And yeah, my hope is that there are more and more digital businesses that come to fruition that can offer consumers, better products, hopefully at better prices. There are more companies, then they have to compete on price. Better taste, better seasonality. People try and learn more about food because, as we've said, look at the obesity and overweight rates on this planet. There is deeply something wrong in this global culture. Then the supermarkets, and that is a problem because many people say, why do you even focus on supermarkets? And I have to be, I'm less purist than I used to be. I'm more pragmatic, and the vast majority of people shop in supermarkets, and they are quite efficient systems to an extent. So they're here to stay, at least for the next 10, 20 years, no doubt about that. And so that's why I have seen that maybe a food waste tax is the solution, but I'm definitely not an expert. And economists, I really invite them to look deeply into this problem. Could it cost the consumer a little more? Absolutely, it might well do. But if that means that food waste reduction if food waste is severely reduced, then I think from a planetary perspective, that's worth it. And also, if you look beyond the West, before Corona, there was 690 million people on this planet who suffered from severe food insecurity, which basically means that they didn't really know where their next balanced meal was coming from. So, we in the West today have never spent so little on food as part of our monthly budget. It's in the UK, it's about 7%. I think Italy, France, about 15%. But, in 1900, it was about 40, 50%. Now, I'm not saying we have to go that high again, but certainly, going up to 20%, for example, when you think that food is medicine in a way, not completely, but, a good diet can really set you on a good way in life. We should be eating better. My philosophy, is prevention, not, get ill, then cure yourself. So diet kind of holds a lot of keys. And then when it comes to supermarket workers, I have great empathy for these people. The work they do is difficult, the wages are low, and wasting that food on that amount must be incredibly depressing. And I do get messages here and there from people saying, oh man, my God, I've been asked to throw out 3,000 liters of sparkling water. And I feel very but empathetic to those people. When it comes to supermarket regulations, when it comes to fruit and vegetables, there is a lot of nonsense going on, and I'm not exactly sure what the solution is to that. Again, for me, the solution to that is trying to go out the supermarket model, because clearly when it comes to fruit and vegetables, for me, the specifications are problematic, and I don't really see how you go around that. But when it comes to meat, for example, in the dumpster, there I do think that is corporate policy, because I had a whistleblower on the phone 10 days ago, 2-hour phone call. And I can't reveal any details yet because it's sensitive. But they were telling me that they're a store manager of an international company, and their company do not want to discount anything more than 30%. And that's because the profit margin of supermarkets is 30%. So when they buy at €7, they then sell on to us at €10. So for them, going from 10 to 7 is the maximum, which is why often they don't want to go in with Too Good To Go, because they're awake and they face a 76% discount, 30% is the top. But because this person is so passionate about food waste, risking their job, they have played with the numbers a bit and they've discounted at 50%, and they've noticed a significant difference in the sales of those products, because to the consumer, 30% was, not so much. 50% is like, you know what, that's a good deal, I'm going to buy that. And, you know, they use the freezer. There's many, consumers can do a lot of that food. And so again, it's policy at HQ level, which is driving a lot of that. And so that person, they told me, the only way they see it is legislation, trying to kind of force a 50% discount on all things that are about to be trashed. And what's interesting, again, is it's not just supermarket, it's also the country's waste management policy, because they were telling me that in this country, in Denmark, and it will vary between countries, but you have incineration bin, where it's all waste to energy, burnt, or you have composting. And so really all the food from the supermarket should be going composting like we do. But the reason why it goes mostly at 70% into the incineration bin is because the cost of the incineration bin is only 50% of the composting bin. And so, you know, HQ, when he tried to change round, when he went back to that job, they called him, they said, what the hell's going on? The cost of the composting bin have increased twice since you've come back in the job. What are you doing? And they just said, well, I'm just doing my job. If you're not happy, please write it to me in writing and I'll change my ways. And they didn't say anything because they realized that they were wrong. But again, it goes to show it's the economics that's driving the whole system, because composting is definitely better than incineration. So we really need systemic solutions to the systemic problems. And I think that's why a lot of people find the work I do quite interesting, because they know that these little plaster solutions won't fix it. And so they're interested by these deeper systemic proposals, at least. I'm not saying it's the solution.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And it's really food for thought, because it's really understanding the whole value chain. So it's not just food waste, but also what happens next, or what happens with the food waste. But also coming back to your point on supermarkets, and here again, I also want to challenge a little bit. And you also, I mean, we're all aware of what COVID causes and how it change our habits. And now it's super common to just go on any e-commerce website and just buy online. But you said that there is like for the next 20 or 30 years, supermarkets will still have a big role. But do you think that like this digitalization or change of habits for consumer, for how they buy things, could also impact the food chain or the role of supermarkets in this sense in the near future?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very interesting area. I mean, I went to Edinburgh University for my bachelor's, and I went back there a couple of years back because my sister was graduating. And we went to the town across the Firth of Forth, which is basically a loch. or a fjord. And because I wanted to go to the birthplace of the global economist Adam Smith, who wrote Wealth of Nations back in the 18th century. And I'd never been there, even though he lived most of his life in Edinburgh. But it was Kirkcaldy, as they call it, Kirkcaldy. And so we went there, and it was interesting. It was a small town, and back in the day, it must have been really small. And he was, from a wealthy family. So you could kind of walk around and understand how he came with his ideas. You could see Edinburgh in the distance, which back in the day was, massive port for the global empire of the British Empire, and you had all sorts of global commodities coming in, sugar, rum, all these things. So he wrote his book and got global fame. But what's interesting is that things are changing. And so in this town that had one of the founders of global capitalism, the high street was dead. I'm talking 60 to 70% of the high street shops were completely abandoned. And back then, 2 years ago, I wasn't read so much about global capitalism. I was maybe a bit sad and kind of romanticizing the past. But that's the system. And that's what we've all, signed up to, maybe not voluntarily, but that's what we live under. And so there's disruption happening all the time. And I'm sure there's probably companies that are founding just right now who in 10 years' time will have a good market share of maybe the fruit and vegetable market of Europe. And so I think the future's unknown, and digitalization is only here to stay, and it's only getting bigger. And I think people, go on Amazon, and every time people criticize Bezos, he becomes richer and richer and richer. So people get much more used to digital commerce. Does that solve food waste? I'm not sure, but if you're a smaller business, you cannot afford to waste on the scale that they are, I assume. So you'd have to be a bit more efficient with the way you go about doing business. But yeah, maybe we have too few farmers in our society. In the USA, there's about 1 to 2% of the whole population that farms. Maybe that needs to be more like 5 to 10%. So you have more regional farmers markets and things like this. But I can't solve it alone. And of course, that's never going to be the apple. But I just try and get the conversation out there so that, thousands of people can start, tens of thousands can start thinking about these issues, because, climate change, biodiversity, and the humanitarian angle is a race against time. So that's kind of why I try and get the conversation started.
Thanks, Matt. I think everything you told us today was extremely interesting, and I'm really fascinated by your initiative. And I really admire people who actually tackle such a complex issue so seriously. Speaking of which, I do have a friend who sent us a couple of questions, and I think it's particularly interesting because he works actually for a food company in Japan. He's a dear friend of mine. We work together in New York, and he, again, I'm not going to mention him today, and I'm not going to mention the company. He's obviously happy to work there, but he's kind of told me, yes, we got this issue here as well, and we waste a lot of food, and it's something I'm really concerned about, and I'm wondering, blah, blah, blah. So send me a couple of questions. So the first thing that I would like to ask you is a very broad question: is there any government or supranational agency that you think is taking these issues more seriously? The European comes to mind, European Union, I don't know, Canada, Australia, United States government, or some more local governments, for example, like, some European governments, or is something that at the moment you feel there is no political pressure to deal with?
Well, I think certainly the United Nations has a role to play because it is that organization that binds us together. I know it's dependent on governments for, income, and so it can only be as critical as it might be, but it has huge power. And so I would really encourage them to push more on this, because food, as they say all the time, food system is at the heart of all solutions. So food waste, of course, is that too. So I'd push more on that, and I try to really split the consumer and commercial angle, because then people will start respecting you more. Because if you blame it all on, you, me, and grandma, as I call it, and then they see photos like me, of one small supermarket, 90 kilos of coffee on one random afternoon, it doesn't hold. People know that it's more complex than that. So I really would say that they have a huge role to play. The organization in England called RAP, they have their flaws, but I think they're doing some great work and they've made great progress on the matter, and they also elevate its profile. Certainly countries like South Korea that have shifted their country's entire food waste. People should really be trying to learn from that. And I know, for example, the Danish government has been trying to learn a bit from that. But no, I think right now there's still a lot of room for improvement. And for me, what doesn't make sense is that we know we have all these massive issues, but, you know, shutting down a coal plant, that's a massive problem, because it's a complex problem because people need power, they need electricity. Wasting food is so much more basic. And if you put the right minds to the problem, you'd solve it like that, you know. So that's the disappointing angle, is that we also have to pick our battles. But yeah, there are some organizations, but definitely room for improvement. Certainly the French government is doing quite a bit on the retail front. Still some problems, but it's better. And I think the Italian government is doing a bit too, especially the city of Milan. But again, I don't know the complete details, because I've only got 70 hours.
Fair enough, absolutely. And the next question is a bit more specific, actually, which I found very, very interesting, which is a lot of these corporate policies seems to be driven by consumer decision. And he asked me a very specific question about that, which is, people see empty shelves and they think, that might be, that is probably not a very good store, I'm not going to buy there. And so the question is there, so first of all, would you think it would be useful to actually drive some, I would say, campaigns, sensibility to, you know, for people to become a bit more sensitive on the subject, and, you know, make them understand that empty shelf doesn't mean poor quality of food, of course. And in general, do you think this issue can be tackled also at a consumer level, like driven public perception about food wasting, and drive people to make better choices about this? Because I'm always very scared. It sounds like a very basic question, but actually personally, because we talk about similar issues here at the podcast, I'm always very skeptical that the consumers are actually going to drive these decisions so massively, mostly because people tend to consume more than they want, when they can. So, you know, you see what I mean? But on the other hand, I've seen a lot of changes in a number of issues. Let's talk about, for example, like, you know, LGBT rights, or even this in the broader sense, the ecological problem. Like, people are way more aware right now and more awake about this problem, thanks to marketing, and what marketing in a broader sense. Like, you see what I mean? Like, you know, public campaigns to make people more sensitive about this. So I was wondering whether there is a role, in your opinion, about this, and how strong is this role?
Yeah, I mean, these companies are only in business thanks to their consumers, right? So I think consumers have a huge role to play. But certainly, we need to become way more knowledgeable about food. So whether we need much more education at an early age, I think that could be a good way to go. Cooking classes. I mean, it's true. Why are people thinking a store isn't good when the shelves are empty? Because actually that should tell you that, you know, there's a lot of stock that's being moved, and so therefore it should be fresher and hopefully more nutritious fruit and vegetables, at least. So you're right. If customers are walking around thinking, my God, this store's crap because they're selling out, something's wrong. Also, I was reading that book that apparently a supermarket store procurement manager is telling Tristram, the people don't shop with their taste buds in mind. It's actually only with their eyes, hence why they want these big courgettes that are actually often tasteless, because of course often the smaller the fruit and vegetable, the more taste is within it. Of course, if you're paying per unit price as opposed per kilo, then we've got a problem. But yeah, I just think with time there has to be more connection with food. But you see it now with the younger generations, the massive vegan and vegetarian movements. And I know it's still niche, but it's growing day by day. That tells you that people are concerned about where this planet's going, and they want to make big changes in their lifestyles. So, you know, taking that step to vegetarianism is a good first step. And then you can start asking much deeper questions about the food system and their food culture wherever they live. So no, I think step by step, there's definitely optimism, but progress is slow. There's no doubt about it. I'm sure I'll be posting probably very similar content in a year's time because it is slow. So let's see. But there is hope because we have to solve it. And every day that goes by where we don't do it, we just lose time. So yeah, let's hope.
Time and energy. Matt, thank you very much. We got a final question, which we asked to every single person coming here, split in two, but it's a very quick one, but it's completely unrelated. Well, you tell me if it's unrelated or not. So, in fact, probably the first part it is related. So, first of all, which book would you recommend regarding this subject? Something to read that you would highly recommend to become more educated on the subject? That's the first question. And the second question, that's the real unrelated one, but just to know a bit better, you and as a guest of this podcast, what is the book that you would say has changed your life? The book or the books?
So I think for food waste, definitely the book by Tristram Stewart, Waste, because that goes from the farm all the way to the waste management companies and every single step. And even though it was written in 2009, it is so up to date still. The data might be slightly off, but that is just an incredible piece of work. And I'm not surprised he's not written anything since because the work that must have gone into that is just mind-blowing. Then books that changed my life. Yeah, unfortunately, I read mostly non-fiction because time is of the essence, which is sad.
That's even better.
Okay, so books. I think Dan Barber, his American Chef, he wrote The Third Plate, and again, it's the whole. It's 4 parts. It's seed, meat, fish, and then plants. And just changed my life about food. That's when I bought a mill, for example. I made my own bread. So that is just absolutely fascinating. And the other interesting book was The Wizard and the Prophet. And it was written again by an American author. And basically it's Norman Borlaug, who was the founder of the Green Revolution, who was the wizard. And then the prophet, a man whose name I forget, but he was in the 1940s, globally famous, but today nobody knows him. And he was writing books that, was basically saying what Greta and all the young strikers are saying today. So that was 70, 80 years ago, imagine. And then also Michael Pollan. Everything he's written is fascinating from a food perspective. So those 3 authors will really change my life.
Matt, thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming here today and to, if you want to educate us a bit more on this subject. So, Federica, sorry, you want to add something?
Yeah, no. Thanks a lot also for the suggestions. I was aware of the book by Matt Barber, but I will definitely read also the other ones because I think that's a super interesting topic. And thanks a lot for all our conversations today. I think that it was super interesting to get some more insights into food waste and understand how complex it is.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure for having this conversation.
Thank you, Matt. And for everyone who's following us, please follow Matt Homewood and his page, An Urban Harvester. Sorry, I'm a bit tired today. On Instagram and on his website. And we will probably see you all next week with another live. We'll follow our Facebook profile and our socials for more updates. Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks again, Matt. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.